I kind of wonder if I'm just on a roll right now and my thinking is just making sense. So, I am gonna record the video of talking about delivering demons and understanding shadows. And then also, too, because I was thinking about the transfiguration of Jesus, which is when Jesus turns into light, essentially, and, floats up to heaven after he dies. So, where do you start with that? Spiritual people are spiritual people because your spirit is supposed to go on after you die. The question begins to formulate, and you begin to wonder what happens after I die. Well, there must be something spiritual to me. I must have a spirit that goes on. And Jesus, and I'm thinking of like the story of Osho from like the 1980s, this Indian guru. One thing that's part of Osho's legend is the way that he died, which was essentially he like meditated and just floated away, but there's suspicion on whether or not he was given like a shot and it like, slowed his heart rate down enough that he could meditate and die in his own timing. That there's suspicion with that. We don't know what the truth is. I don't know what the truth is because I haven't looked deep enough into that subject. But part of his spiritual legacy, which in 2,000 years, who's to say those suspicions won't be buried and lost, and in 2,000 years he will have meditated and died in his own timing, right? That could happen. I think something similar happened with Jesus's death. I think when Jesus died, he it's possible that the apostles stole his body and told a story of him being completely healed, all his wounds being completely healed, and him turning into or transfiguring into a being of light and then passing on into heaven. I think that that could have been a story that they told. I think that that's the most logical way to view that. However, it was written down as being important, and so we're going to turn it into a fucking metaphor. And someone like me is like, they wrote this down, it must be important, we're going to use it as a metaphor. So I was experiencing for a period of my life, a very long period from a young age until I was in my mid-20s, of feeling a presence around me or in seeing a shadow, a like human-shaped shadow in my room at night. It was very hard for me to be alone. It was very hard for me to sleep because I was just afraid of this shadow. So I'm like mid-20s and I decide to have a summer where I'm experimenting with psychedelic drugs, and through a couple of experiences I begin to really, really confront this fear of mine that there's a shadow around me. And through pure coincidence at the time, I was also deeply invested in the psychology of Carl Jung, and he talks about the shadow. And he talks about these parts of ourselves that we repress and that we don't talk about and don't want people to see. And like, you don't know that I'm an angry person. You don't know that I flipped out and threw a plate last night. You don't know those things about me because I keep them hidden. That's your shadow, right? But what happens over time is it's not just this conscious, don't let other people see my shadow. It becomes this unconscious, let me not even look. I don't even have a shadow. What are you talking about? Right? Now, in the story of Jesus, the way that it's written out in the Bible, we assume that the character of Jesus had no shadow. There was nothing he was hiding or repressing because he was perfect and he was perfection. So, by his example, living this perfect and compassionate life, where the rules were laid out and I showed you that I could fulfill all of these rules and this was possible and this was not hard, I don't die. I'm healed. My outside wounds are healed, and I turn into a being of light. And I am the opposite of a shadow now. Human beings have a shadow, but Jesus Christ is painted as this character that is pure light. I can do what's good. I can always do what's good. I can overcome any temptation to do what's considered wrong, and I can do what is considered good. That's the character of Jesus. And that's why people become invested in his character and want to be like Jesus. It is possible to be a very disciplined person, to have rules laid out for you and to follow all of the rules. What's more important now, though, is not just following anybody's rules, because if we were just to follow the rules, we would form shadows. We would form intense shadows where there's parts of us that don't fit in with the rules, so we hide them away and we don't talk about them, and we don't even remember you did that. Self talking to self. It's we is me talking to myself. Like, I don't even remember that I did those things. So I am a being of light. Why do Christians seem like hypocrites? For that. That right there is hiding away these things that are shadows. So I'm doing drugs. I'm on LSD. I'm doing mushrooms. I am experiencing this shadow more real than I've ever seen it ever. It's standing behind my curtain. I'm laying there staring at it, and it is not going away finally. It is not just a figment of my imagination. Now I see it. In that moment, because of my mind remembering that Carl Jung told us that shadows are repressions of ourself, I looked at the shadow and I began asking myself, what am I not seeing about me? What am I hiding away from? What am I not telling myself the truth of? So much. I was an angry person, filled with hate. I wanted to hurt other people because of how hurting I felt. I was acting in angry ways out of sheer control and just, you need to do it my way, instead of having compassion, understanding that each person is an individual and is welcome to make their own mistakes and should be living a life making many, many mistakes because they're individuals and they need to learn for themselves. But no, you need to listen to me because you're not allowed to make mistakes. Why? When I was making so many, and these were the things I was not being honest with myself about. I was thinking I was being this helpful, kind, servant-hearted person. I thought I was being so good to other people, but at night I was seeing my own shadow, and I was laying there with myself, and I was aware of myself. And that's what I mean when I say that I've exorcised my own demon. At that moment, that shadow thing behind the curtain turned into the plant that it was. It turned into the plant that sits behind my window, and I saw it for the plant, and I didn't see it for the humanoid shape, because it was no longer a humanoid shape. It was simply a shadow of a plant, and it was a shadow of my own personality, and I stopped fearing it, and I stopped fearing myself, and I stopped fearing this part of me that gets angry, and I stopped fearing this part of me that is a hypocrite, and I stopped fearing this part of me that couldn't do it as right as I thought other people should do it. I could not do it as right as I was making other people live. I was holding people to a standard I couldn't even reach myself. So I took the bar off of my life. There was no bar of perfection. There's nothing you could ever, or there's nothing that I could ever see for your life that is a standard I should place on you. That all left me. I know that the Christian worldview, though, doesn't paint that picture. It doesn't give you that picture. The Christian worldview says Jesus was perfect, and everybody falls short of that. Everybody fucking sucks. And that, I mean, that's exactly what I'm saying. Now you realize everybody falls short, everybody makes mistakes, now we're all in the same camp. But Christians don't act like that. Christians act up here with Jesus. They think that they are Christ. They think that they are the Christ. Not that Jesus Christ was the example and we should have compassion for all of us because none of us are as perfect as this example. No, now because we're Christians, we're just like Jesus and we are as good as Jesus. And Jesus did no wrong, so I did no wrong. I'd like to see these people raise themselves from the dead then. So, yeah, that's demons. That's shadows. That's Jesus transfigured into light, from my perspective, in my opinion. And this is how I have settled. I think if anything, what I'm doing right now is I'm talking to myself at 18 years old who was just beginning to question things all around me. I'm talking to that person and like letting them know what they were going to find. When you were questioning the existence of God and the validity of Jesus and whether or not he was a real person or a magical person or any of these things, this is what I found now 12 years later. This is what I figured out. Jesus was probably mostly human. Probably. You know, there's a miraculous story about him being born of a virgin. Great story. I too was born of a virgin. I could tell you that. I could tell you that. Like, storytelling from ancient times is even less reliable. Nothing should be considered reliable coming from the ancient times. It was so fucking long ago. Biblical times were 2,000 years ago. Exactly. Shut the fuck up. You can't trust that shit. But we can look at it like a metaphor. You know, we can dig into it and think, what is worth this? And that was, as I was reading my dad's Bible the other day, I realized that's what is considered wisdom, is to like it says in there, if you read the Bible and you even decide that just some of it is worth something to you, you are more wise and better off. And like, this was in the fuck, I want to find it now. Even if you just believe some of it, it's better than saying the whole thing is worthless. And that I actually believe that 100%. Here's me. I'll tell you up and down to anybody's face. I'm technically an atheist. The way that the Christian worldview paints God, I don't believe that. The way that the Hindu people paint God, the way that Jewish people and Catholic people, all their gods, I don't believe in that at all. Not for 1 second. Not the Islamic God. I'm technically an atheist, but I understand what it means. And I won't be able to find this. I just know it. Okay, here we go. This is where it is. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps them and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. I'm using that verse to justify what I'm doing here right now for my old Christian self. And that's that she was going to play by the rules. If I was going to go through and pick apart what I thought about the Bible and whether or not I thought it was real and whether or not this was something that was true for me, I was going to play by the rules. And there's the rules right there. If you annul it, which I'm pretty sure you'd have to look up the meaning specifically. I looked it up though, and it meant something like discrediting, or just like, if you say that this is nothing and not worth even looking at, then you're considered least in the kingdom of heaven. But if you look at this and you see what's good about it and you teach others what's good about this, then you're considered great in the kingdom of heaven. I don't care about the kingdom of heaven. I don't think I'm going off into heaven, but I am playing by the rules of my former self. And she would be seeing that. She would be judging me against that verse right there. And so I do think that part of the Bible is actually validly good for spiritual development. But this is not the only one. In fact, I have a better one. This is not the Bible. This is the Tao Te Ching. And this is way better. Way, way, way better than the Bible. And it's like, comparatively, way easier to read. Way easier to read. The Tao Te Ching is way better than the Bible. But it's still worth reading. And I've been picking this shit apart. I love reading the Bible as an atheist now because now I see it so differently. I'm actually reading the verses now. I'm not just skimming over things that don't make sense to me. I'm literally reading verse for verse. It's taking me so much longer to get through this now as an atheist than it did when I was reading it when I was a Christian, because I was skimming over the things that didn't make sense to me. Anything that didn't make sense, I just read really fast. I picked out the things that made sense to my tiny little pea brain, and I was like, great, this is wonderful. This totally affirms that Jesus is real for me, and I don't need much convincing beyond this. Nowadays, I need a lot more convincing to believe spiritual things. I need a lot of convincing. I need to see like actual good change being made in order to believe anybody, anywhere, talking about anything when it comes to spirituality. I need good proof, convincing proof. And I learned that from Friedrich Nietzsche, who was a philosopher who was highly critical of the Christian people that were surrounding him. I want to say that differently. The religious people around him. He was highly, highly critical. And I just read this portion in his book today, this morning, where he was like, these religious people need to be more convincing. If they want me to believe that what they're saying is right and true, they need to be a little more convincing than just singing me songs. They need to be a little more convincing than just yelling at me passionately. I'm going to need more convincing. And that is called judging people's character. And I am a harsh judge of a religious person's character. Harsh judge. Because if you're religious and you think your religion makes you better in some way, being religious is better than being non-religious. If that is your mindset, you better surely be a better person than me, because I'm not religious. And if I'm a better person than you and I have more compassion and more understanding and more love in my heart than the average religious person, then what is the point? What are they doing then? Wasting their time and money in a club. And that doesn't make them any better than me. More on churches next time.